Right, we're live. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Right, here we go.
We're
Right,
okay.
I've got a joke. Can we start?
Well, are we not going to introduce?
In a minute. Well,
All right,
let me do the intro, and then
right,
we'll do
okay,
the
okay,
thing. We'll
good,
just
good,
do this and then get that out of the way. Right.
Let's hear it.
Right, knock, knock.
Who is there?
Yoda lady.
Yoda lady. Who?
I love that. I just love it.
Yeah,
I
very
just
good.
love Yoda lady.
That's just.
See, you said it in your head, see, that because you're a thinker, Chris. That's the challenge.
What do you call a hippo with one leg?
Don't know.
A hoppo.
Right, okay. So, right, okay. See, so let's... Welcome to the Good Brand Podcast. Good are a brand consultancy based in the UK, and what we do is we get together and we talk about brand and pish like that.
Well, yeah, that's one way of putting it.
Yeah, well, we're trying to make it more valued and understood. So, but I'm bringing it down to earth. You know, it's not highfalutin. I'm bringing it down.
And listen, it's all change.
Well, it is all change. It is all change. Because Julie's still out of the business.
Well, Julie is out of the business at the moment because she and her husband have adopted a wee baby girl. Mm-hmm. So she is enjoying motherhood, shall we say.
Yep.
So we have a guest with us today. Today we have Mike Hunter. He is Associate Creative Director in the agency, and I'm delighted because we've for the first time, we've got a real live designer creative
We said
on
it
the
would never
pod.
be done.
They said
it
would never happen. But he's here. We want to say hello, Mike.
Hello.
There we are.
There we go.
And that's all for today.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for
everyone. Join us next week.
Right. So, Mike, you wrote this article about brand guidelines. Can you give us the overview? Why did you write it? What made you do it?
Well, I suppose in my line of work, I see a lot of brand guidelines. I kind of interface with them pretty much every day.
And you create them, right?
I do. I have created many brand guidelines in the many years that I've been doing this line of work. Well, I suppose it was prompted. I've kind of been meaning to write an article about it for a while and never really found the right lens to frame it through. Mm-hmm. And then we were asked a couple of months ago by one of our clients to read through a set of guidelines that they were working on at the time, right, and give them our feedback on how useful we thought they were.
Right.
I suppose. And
useful.
Because, they're meant to be useful. They're a tool. And to offer any thoughts on where we could streamline them or improve them, just kind of give a bit of feedback on how, as a kind of incumbent agency, you would find that document to work with if you were given it and told,
right, so that sense
to produce a piece of design work.
So that sense of objectivity you were given led to you kind of making these observations.
Yeah, I suppose it's kind of, it's come from a place of user testing, I guess, more than anything else. It's, you produce a document, you produce a tool effectively, and you want to make sure that it's doing its job properly. So give it to the people that are going to be using it, and then ask them where they think you could improve it.
Yeah.
So what normally happens during these podcasts is that Julie and Chris talk about it a lot, then I ignore it.
Or we bicker a wee bit.
And then I kind of come in and go, well, I know we talked about this, but I think for framing it in brand guidelines and assuming that somebody doesn't know what brand guidelines are, and which is the kind of, a little bit descriptive of what is a good set of brand guidelines? What does that look like as a concept before we get into the changes that we would want to see in it?
Because what Mike's article does is basically make a summary of, you make 5 or 6 points about the challenges with them, and then you offer some solutions as well. So we thought we could summarize that. So I think Stuart's key point is, so what are they?
And what should they be doing? And then, because that's obviously sparking off what they're not doing, and I think that we can get into that.
Well, we've had this conversation, Stuart, many a time on lots of different lines of work that we've done, but I think definitions are important. You kind of all need to be coming from a place of understanding where we know we're all talking the same language before you can kind of evaluate this sort of stuff. And to me, I guess the definition that I would be working to is a set of guidelines are a document or a repository of all the information around a brand's visual identity and how that brand manifests itself in the real world. So that can be how it communicates verbally, things like tone of voice, the approach to headline writing, messaging, etc. It can be the visual articulation. So, the simplest, the logo, typefaces, your color palette. It's crucially, it's a single point of reference that everybody connected to a brand in one way or another can reference and make sure that when they produce communications and design work for that brand, using that brand identity, things are kept consistent. And
as we know, and I've got a slide in my decks, is that, one of the things that makes a strong brand is that consistency and discipline of execution. It's not, it's if I'm picking you up right, the guideline in theory is what should be keeping everybody consistent and disciplined is the kind of guideline. So
that's the purpose. And it's probably they've evolved over time as design and branding has become a more kind of mature medium. But you can go back to, the 50s and 60s and people were producing brand standards manuals for big organizations like NASA, British Rail. And by and large, the function has remained the same throughout.
Is there a difference between them, a set of brand guidelines and a design toolkit? Because one of the issues I've got, I suppose, is that one of the things I've thought in the past is that people try and force too much stuff into them.
Yes.
And I suppose that raises another question, which you're going to come on to, like who they're for. But I sometimes think that clients get that mixed up.
Yeah. I think, again,
from your point of view,
definitions are important. Yeah. It comes down to what everybody that's interfacing with that document understands the purpose of the document or the tool to be.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the things that I was trying to get across in the articles. There's not a right way and a wrong way of doing it necessarily. It's not a one-size-fits-all, this is how you go about creating it. There is some standard content that tends to appear, but my general sense from seeing a lot of guidelines documents and working on a lot of them as well is that they are becoming more overblown and they are becoming more
too complicated.
They're becoming a kind of all things to all men, and it's that misinterpreting of the idea of it being a consistent sort of North Star that can steer everything, but they're becoming a bit of a dumping ground for just everything connected to
when
the brand.
You see what the corporate PowerPoints set out in the brand guidelines, you begin to go,
There's a lot here. Mm-hmm. The page count, to put it in a very basic terms, I guess the page count of these documents feels like it is growing exponentially.
Yeah. But I suppose every client's different, every job's different, and some of them to do with the size of the organisation, and their philosophy around how much control they want to exert.
I think that's the thing. It is about control. It is the thing where, on one hand, I can see why they get huge because suddenly then you've got more channels. Like, what does our Instagram look like? When actually that's that you would. And when you're pushing these, not relatively new now, but just make sure that's right. Well, we must make sure that but actually the guidelines should tell you what goes in Instagram rather than what.
There's an argument that, rather than telling you exactly how you do it, it should outline an approach so that you kind of, it's a teach a man to fish kind of metaphor.
And is that the challenge? Because what they're not called is the brand rule book.
Well, again, what's your definition? I had a conversation with my partner about this, and she comes from a client services background. She's got a very different outlook on these things, where she made the very valid point that from a practicality point of view, it's useful to have everything in one place.
Sure.
And I can see the argument for that, but the counter to that, I would say, is that if everything's in one place, then I have to do a lot more searching to find what's relevant to me. And I think that comes back to my understanding of these documents and these tools is that they are a tool for design teams first and foremost, and the information that a graphic designer or a product designer might need is probably quite different to what other aspects of a marketing team might need.
I totally agree. They're not for marketing teams in my view. They're not. They're a technical tool.
However, I think
tool for designers,
and obviously none of our clients. But I think the challenge sometimes it feels like the finishing line.
Yeah,
that actually look what you've paid for.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. Look,
it's like 600 pages. That's what you paid for.
It's the Bible.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the next point. And one of your points. I mean, you make a lot, and we're jumping around here. And read the article because it's great. But I think the next thing is so who is it that uses them?
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a that is one of the fundamental kind of takeaways
Questions,
from it, I think, is before you ever put pen to paper, this is assuming you were starting with a blank sheet of paper, but outlining who this product is for and who this tool is for and who's going to use it, what context are they going to be using it in, what are they using it for, that kind of initial scoping, and really kind of interrogating the brief behind creating a set of guidelines is fundamental to making sure that you create them so that they're useful and effective, because they're supposed to be useful.
One of the points you make, which I think is one of the most insightful, is that I think sometimes clients believe that once they've created these documents, that hey presto, all of the sausages that come out of the machine are going to be even and the same. And it's an odd metaphor, but that's not the case, because it depends, right?
There's too many variables.
So what are some of the...
Well, I think one of the major variables would be who's using them. So you create, let's just assume that you get over the finishing line of creating a set of brand guidelines, and they may be 10 pages, they may be 100. You then give them to designers and design teams and say, right, take that and use that to steer your design work on other briefs. And those briefs are very, very varied in the types of people interfacing with them. Not all designers are created equal, unfortunately.
So the way they interpret them is down to ability and capability.
And I'd say content as well, because the way that the content's written in the guidelines can affect how they're interpreted, because you can be very definite with your guidance and it's less guidance and more standards that must be adhered to, or you can give people guidance and inform an approach, and you'll get two very different results from that. So I think I used a bit of a clumsy metaphor in the article about I could give a hammer and some nails to 10 different craftspeople, and somebody might be able to make me a really nice piece of furniture or a rocking horse, and it would be beautiful, and I'd put it in my living room, and somebody, if you gave it to me, I'd struggle to fix a door hinge.
And as would Stuart, because it's not got a plug on it.
Correct.
But I think it's a good metaphor, that it's only as good as the person.
Yeah, it's a tool. I think that's a useful way of thinking of them, is less a piece of... I think that the difficulty is when you're creating them and when you're involved in the creation of guidelines, they are the work, they are the deliverable. But actually, once they're delivered, they just facilitate more delivery of work.
When they're in the wild. So how do you cross the bridge around in-house design teams? Because I know that you're doing that quite a lot, interfacing with people that are in-house versus other third-party agencies. Because what are the issues there? What are you seeing?
I don't know that issues is necessarily the best way from it, because that makes it sound overly negative, and I think in-house design teams get a bad press, if I'm honest.
Say more.
I think in-house design is an incredibly challenging place to be working, because you don't, to use a Stuart phrase, you don't have the rarefied air that we have in agency land.
It's so rarefied.
So rarefied. And my understanding is that environment is not rarefied at all. It is high pressure, high turnover, under a lot of constraints, and usually, from what I see, it can be quite under-resourced as well. I think you get
around... So because I remember once you one of the clients came and sat with you for 2 or 3 days. And we're that invested.
Years
it was
ago.
good. It was good. It was a good.
And I remember him saying at the time, "This is all great. I'm so jealous that you work in this kind of environment where everybody takes this kind of seriously." In when I go back to my workplace, I'm just the guy that does the brochures.
Interesting.
And I think, in an ideal world, as a tool, your guidelines would be supporting those teams so that they feel confident to do their job to a higher standard.
And you're right, we've got a role to play there too. And that's, as you say, in understanding the scope and what they're for. What about, without sounding like it's 1996, what about, or 2006, what about the digital side of it? I
think because this ties into a question I was going to ask. I think the challenge is, one of the challenges I think about guidelines is looking at it as a deliverable, which suggests it has an end.
Yeah.
And actually the problem is when we do a new brand, in theory, you would never ever launch the brand, if you were going to do guidelines first, there's a bit of kind of stress testing and putting it out, and you can and adapting it and moving it rather than going. But again, I think sometimes that feels like the end of the project.
Well, interestingly, we as a design team at Good have tried to adapt our approach to that over the years. Rather than where once upon a time you would probably try and deliver a complete set of guidelines and that's it done. I think we've learned that now we kind of, in an ideal world, job and budget and client allowing, we phase it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's part of a broader kind of brand refresh or, developing a new brand identity, you would do a phase one kind of outlining key principles, key content, but with a mind to come back to that 6 months, 9 months down the line, once you've had an opportunity to start putting that brand identity under stress in the real world. Because until you do that, you don't start to notice some of where a brand identity kind of struggles, and then you can address that, and then you can add further guidance.
And also just working with in-house design teams, because suddenly you go, you know what, and this, the road tells people good intentions. This great thing here just doesn't work there. Because we've got to do that requires half an hour, when really we've got to turn it around in 15
and I think
minutes.
You have to be
it's
very,
that collaborative
very
nature.
cognizant of not preaching and telling people this is how you do it, because
the purity of design.
Yeah, the real dogmatic. This is how we are the agency designer, and we will tell you how this works. I think is an absolute recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it's the tyranny of brand guidelines.
So again, understanding your audience and having conversations with them, trying when you can to build a relationship with your client's internal design team and say, right, okay, where are your pain points? How can we solve that? How you adapt the work that you do based on that?
As the resident strategist, do you believe these things should have all the brand building blocks, values, mission, vision, all that stuff?
Because yes,
it's the start of the story.
It is the start of the story, and where in theory, I mean, while nobody wants to sit through one of my 4-hour presentation sessions about the brand, I mean, even though they're legendary, they are. I mean, they're always waiting for the design bit, and I get that, because that's the bit that's tangible. Understand? Show me the pictures, and it's there, and I get that. But the challenge is, especially with the way we work, is that the strategy is setting the. It's setting the road for the design, and so if you don't have that at the beginning, it loses context, and it shows how, in some ways, by not putting that in, it almost makes the design seem a little bit more superficial, because it just came out of nowhere.
It gives it the framework. So, Mike, when you're then building those bits, you can refer back to that source stuff, the source.
And I think if you're including that type of content, it is important that it doesn't feel like it's just dumped in there. It should be given the proper context, and you do sometimes need to edit some of that content down so that it's relevant for your audience, but you only know if it's relevant if you talk to your audience and see what they need.
Okay. Right, I'm just conscious of time. Let's talk about some of the solutions then. Let's talk about how you avoid some of these pitfalls. What are your kind of key takeaways or things, watch outs for when you're in the process of doing this stuff?
I think probably the biggest one that I was aware of it before I wrote the article, and then as I started writing it, it kind of crystallized it in my head, is how much the success of these documents and these tools lies in planning before you put pen to paper. And
do you mean that you think that too many of these things are brought in or briefed without much thought?
I think
it's like do a brand guidelines document.
Yeah, I think it's very easy, and it's not a criticism necessarily. I think it's very easy to identify a need for brand guidelines. Okay, well, let's brief somebody. Let's go and
very
create
broadly.
If you miss the state, and if you do that and just dive into page 1, the brand, and you just start going through the motions, and you kind of do that one size fits all approach, that's where I think they start to create some of the issues that I outlined at the start. I think interrogating the needs of your document, who's it for, what do you want it to do, things like, I speak about flexibility versus rigidity, how there's consistent and then there's dogmatic. And
you're dogmatic.
I'm very dogmatic.
No, but it's a good point. It is a good point.
You know, I think somewhere buried in the article, there's the point that, do you want your guidelines to inspire high-level creatives to produce high-level creative work? That requires a level of trust with the people that you're working with, and you would give them guidance but expect them to probably bend the rules in places, because that's generally where that high-level creative thinking flourishes.
Yeah.
Versus sometimes there's a very real need for, I need to make sure that everybody that's creating emails and
this
social ads
this
is
relates
using the
back
right-
to the client's point about if they're looking to create consistency in market and region, and they've got no real control down the line about the quality of agency or creatives that we're working with. It probably needs to be a bit tighter.
Yeah,
right?
there is a level of kind of dogmatism that you need to have, but that's
Not like that, like this.
and that's very different to if we're going to be giving these to a select number of very trusted agencies that we know are just going to get the basics fundamentally because they are great designers. Again, not all designers are created equal. Levels of education vary. The tools that people are using, that all varies. And if you understand all that and outline the objectives for the document up front, then you have a better chance of being able to identify whether or not it's successful.
So it seems like what you're saying is that the thought and the scoping exercise beforehand is of vital importance.
It's the same kind of thing as saying, you know what, we want a strategy. It's the same, you know, or we want a website. You kind of go, whoa, okay, Tiger, let's have a little chat. What do you want to do? What does what's the point? Like? Yeah, it's all that kind of stuff and understanding. And I think sometimes brand guidelines, because again, it's the deliverable of the project sometimes rather than the beginning. Sometimes it's actually the beginning of the next phase. Yeah. It just becomes one of these things that people just, I want my 600 pages.
And I think I can't put too much emphasis on how easy it is to not scope these things properly. You're talking everything from who's using it, what's the purpose of it, what's the page count, down to things like the format. You asked earlier about digital.
What is the format? What are the issues?
What do you need? Traditionally, well, let's go back a wee bit. It used to be that you got a printed manual. Yep. Those were the good old days.
Yeah, I remember them. Keith used to have them with a ring binder.
Designers love them.
Oh, they love
collect them in ring binders.
I couldn't stand
beautifully.
Oh, the pages and the smelling of the paper and the touching of the paper and the
good stuff.
Oh, God. Thank God for the internet.
Well, it's got its own challenges.
Right.
But then bearing in mind when I sort of graduated and started working on these type of documents, we were already probably moving into the land of the dreaded land of the PDF.
Yeah,
the PDF, yes. and quite
purgatory.
Often it's
purgatory.
And for a while there was a bit of a kind of, they were toolkits. We didn't call them guidelines. It's so a toolkit, and people still do that sometimes. But it's definitions. There are pros to that. I think within the article I'd kind of said, is it a one and done document? If you're confident that you're creating this and things aren't going to change, this is an established brand identity, we don't see this changing for a long time, then sure, do something like that. But the pitfalls of that are, they're not massively flexible, especially if it's printed, and when you have a PDF document or something, it's very easy. That kind of goes out into the world, and then you have no control over who's sharing it and
version control.
Version control is massive because things do go out of date. They just do. If you update it, how do you know? You say refer to the brand guidelines. Well, which version of the brand guidelines?
And that's where we went to online, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what digital content. It's one of the main strengths of it. Is it's one central point that everybody refers to, but it's very easy to update ad hoc.
All the shareability of a PDF with all the control in theory.
And then added benefits. Now you get into a point where you're seeing platforms and things that are building in kind of asset management, template formatting, all these sort of things.
It crosses over into quite a big sort of IT thing, doesn't it?
I think also part of the challenge with it is that digital is kind of just it's all now with the big platforms. You're now starting to get into a little bit more restrictive of what it is because you're working to their format. Like this is how this looks because it's cheaper and it's and it'll do. So it's an interesting thing with that. What you're talking about with Keith back in the day. I think Gutenberg did his first.
I think
Gutenberg did his first brand guideline. Anyway,
yeah.
so
no, was it not Papyrus?
Papyrus, I think I hear it. But you kind of got the touchy feel, and it became a part of the challenge. I think when I see some of these old ones, is they became works of art in and of themselves.
Yeah. And I think there's a interesting argument to there being a relevance to that, because permit me to get a bit art schooly for a minute, but the nature of the object itself reflects the brand.
And the medium is the message.
Well, do you want to reflect your brand in 20 pages that you printed off on your desktop printer, or are you going to invest in your brand identity? But that's a different conversation.
And then you're getting it now to the other thing where it's now basically a functional tool that you can buy for it's a number, and you will plug in the
and what I
the
do
things
like
in
about
there,
that is what you lose in that. I think designers as a species are naturally a little suspicious of that, because, well, that's not my design. I didn't do the layout of it. The components have been decided before I come to it, which is a fair point. But the counter would be, you're spending your time and your energy on the content and the actual information, and that's what you're supposed to be designing, not a beautiful document.
And do you think, is that what AI is going to do in this space? What is it going to do? Can you see a world where
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what it's no. I don't know. I think the interesting thing that's going to be is tone of voice guidelines within a brand guideline, because I am pretty close to thinking that what you can do is you can train an AI to manage tone of voice on maybe not that first level page, maybe not the I'm thinking a website, that top page, but the consistent thing on second, third, lower pages that kind of get missed could all just be put into an AI and tweaked to be within a tone of voice, and that could sit within your brand guidelines. Go right, put this copy in here and get it out.
I think one potential use, because I am largely skeptical of AI, as you should be at this point, but I wonder if there's a use for it, rather than seeing it as a way to create content, is actually a way to enforce your guidelines. Well, to make sure your guidelines are adhered to.
And that's exactly what it's going. And that's what I mean. But it's not creating the content there. What you're doing is like, so what I'll do is I'd say to Chris, right, this has got to be written in a good tone of voice. You give me your article, and the AI will take out all the fuck words and stuff like that.
Visual application of that as well, where you could have incumbent agencies or third parties creating communications for your brand. So an Instagram post or a brochure, you run the artwork through some sort of AI tool, and it checks your color.
Checks human life.
Check your color values, all the boring stuff that you pretend you don't care about.
And I think it's kind of, and it might be a bit boring, it might straight, but I don't think what it won't do is you're not going to launch a massive campaign, and you're not going to do an AI campaign. No. There is going to be, but I think if it's going to take away some of the heavy lifting on the low level stuff,
why not?
That's what it's going to be.
And we need to embrace that.
To Mike's point about those, what it goes back to Mike's point about if you're trying to set standards rigorously for agency Z down there, they've then got even less excuse to go, I didn't see that in the guidelines. You then go, well, upload this and we'll get something.
Don't worry, we've got a tool for that.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's going to say, go back and do this, this, and this. Now, I don't think that's quite with us yet, but certainly I think tone of voice on low level stuff, I think could be straight, because we had a client who was because Darren did some really nice tone of voice for the client, and what he was worried about is going, well, I can see this in the home page, I can see this in the About Us page. My concern is we're 300 pages deep, and every page matters to him, that we're going to lose that tone of voice, and I want to make sure it's something that someone is looking after it.
Very good. Good. I think. Are we?
I think this might even need a part 2, because I think it's an interesting thing to kind of get into in the air.
I think it's been really interesting to start talking about other brand elements, particularly from a creative or a design point of view. I think it's quite interesting.
Well, you know what? If you do like this, please like and subscribe, and if it's useful, please share with a friend. And listen, see in the iTunes store, I think it's called that, with the Apple Podcast. You can hit.
Is that an AI thing?
No, it's a real thing. And what you've got to do is as a human, because at the moment we're about 3 stars. That's not good for this quality of content. And I can't ask my mum again. 3.5. So just a wee comment, a wee thing would be hugely valuable. And especially because it's a bit different, and that shows that you like the content. Content.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you for
having
being
me.
here. Hopefully we can see you again.
Yeah, look forward to
watch
it.
the roads.
All
Cheers.
the best.
Bye.
Cheers.